Welcome back, Army. We know BTS as global icons, spreading love, positivity, and hope. But beneath those angelic smiles and flawless choreographies, these 7 boys hide a chaotic, mischievous, and downright naughty side. Have you ever wondered what really happens when the cameras keep rolling but the idol filters completely fall off? What secret rebellious acts did they pull right under the agency's noses? Or which member brazenly broke the rules on live television, leaving the staff sweating and fans screaming? Get ready to gasp, laugh out loud, and question everything you thought you knew about your ultimate bias. Are you brave enough to handle their wildest, unfiltered antics? Let's dive straight in to the top 7 BTS members' naughty moments that left ARMY speechless. Number 7. Jungkook, The Midnight Rebellion, Weverse live madness without permission. Have you ever wondered what happens when the golden boy of the biggest boy band in the entire universe decides that he has absolutely had enough of the strict, polished, and tightly controlled rules of the K-pop industry? Well, Army, grab your snacks and lock your doors, because we are taking you back to those unforgettable, chaotic, and downright rebellious nights when Jungkook completely hijacked the internet and gave the entire corporate staff at HYBE a collective, heart-stopping panic attack. You see, in the highly manufactured and heavily scrutinized world of South Korean entertainment, an idol's live broadcast is usually a meticulously planned, sanitized affair. There are managers breathing down their necks in the room, strict scripts to follow, controversial topics to avoid at all costs, and a rigid curfew to maintain an image of absolute perfection. But our beloved Golden Maknae, he took that heavy, suffocating rulebook, tore it into 1,000,000 pieces, set it on fire, and threw it out of his luxurious apartment window. It all started as a seemingly innocent late-night notification on Weverse, the fan community app, but it violently escalated into a series of rogue, unapproved broadcasts that would go down in history as the ultimate display of idol rebellion. Picture this vividly. It is 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., sometimes pushing 5 a.m. in Seoul. Millions of fans around the globe are fast asleep, only to be abruptly awakened by the frantic buzzing of their phones. And what exactly do they see when they groggily tune in? Jungkook, completely barefaced, his long raven hair gloriously messy, wearing nothing but comfortable, oversized clothes, sitting on his couch with a cold can of beer, a glowing karaoke microphone, and a dangerously unfiltered attitude. He wasn't there to promote a multi-million-dollar album campaign or to deliver a rehearsed robotic greeting. He was there simply because he missed ARMY and wanted to hang out. Company policies be damned. During these legendary marathon live sessions, which often stretched for agonizingly long hours for the monitoring staff, Jungkook did the unthinkable. He drank alcohol heavily on camera, getting visibly and adorably tipsy, which is considered a massive, career-threatening taboo in the conservative idol sphere. He sang karaoke at the top of his lungs, completely unbothered by the fact that his wealthy neighbors might file noise complaints against him. He cooked massive bowls of late-night makguksu, generously sharing his secret recipes, and even folded his laundry, specifically his Calvin Klein underwear, while casually chatting with over 10 million viewers, as if they were his lifelong best friends hanging out in his living room. But the true peak of this glorious naughtiness, the exact moment that left everyone absolutely speechless and clutching their pearls, was when he brazenly looked right into the camera and admitted with a cheeky, mischievous grin that he was doing all of this completely without the company's permission. The company's probably asleep right now. They don't know I'm doing this, he chuckled, taking a long, satisfying sip of his drink. You could almost visualize the sheer, unadulterated panic sweeping through the HYBE headquarters the next morning. Imagine the PR team scrambling, phones ringing off the hook, and exhausted managers wiping cold sweat from their foreheads, trying to figure out how to do damage control. Even his own group members were profoundly stunned by his sheer audacity. Jin, ever the responsible and cautious older brother, dramatically popped into the live comment section, warning him in all caps, "Hey, aren't you going to get in trouble with the company? You need to sleep." RM, the formidable and protective leader, also flooded the comments, trying to check on their rebellious youngest member. But did Jungkook care? Not in the slightest. He boldly stated that he was a grown adult, a seasoned professional who had sacrificed his entire youth to the industry for over a decade, and he absolutely demanded the freedom to be genuine with the people who mattered most, the fans. He aggressively dismantled the artificial corporate barrier of agency censorship standing between him and ARMY. He wanted to share his true, unvarnished self, complete with his deep vulnerabilities, his melancholy late-night thoughts, his tipsy, infectious giggles, and his genuine bone-deep exhaustion from the pressures of global fame. Remember the time he proudly and defiantly showed off his entire heavily tattooed arm? In South Korea, tattoos are still highly stigmatized and are legally required to be blurred out or covered up on national television broadcasts. But on his rogue live stream, Jungkook rolled up his sleeves and meticulously went through every single tattoo, explaining the profound personal meaning behind the ink, openly defying conservative societal norms, and basically telling the world to accept him exactly as he is, flaws and all. He even fell asleep on a live broadcast. Yes, you heard that absolute madness right. The biggest pop star on the face of the planet left his camera running, wrapped himself in blankets, and drifted off into a deep snoring slumber for over 21 minutes, while a staggering 6 million people watched him breathe, completely mesmerized, confused, and fiercely protective over his utter lack of care for conventional broadcasting standards. It was a moment of sheer vulnerability and raw authenticity that you will never, ever see from any other musical artist of his global caliber. But it wasn't just all chaotic fun and rebellious games. There was a deep, heavily reflective, and incredibly emotional weight to these rogue midnight lives. Jungkook openly expressed his intense frustrations about the extreme censorship in his daily life. He bravely brought up past habits like smoking and called out the ridiculous, suffocating reality that even as an adult man approaching his 30s, he was still forcibly expected by society and the industry to maintain this pristine, flawless, and ultimately robotic image. "Why can't I talk about it? I'm an adult now. I want to be honest," he passionately argued, his voice laced with a potent mixture of defiance and a desperate, heartbreaking plea for true understanding. He emotionally confessed that if it weren't for the fans waiting for him, he wouldn't have the motivation to keep dealing with the stifling, soul-crushing constraints of his immense fame. He desperately wanted to break the toxic illusion that K-pop idols are perfect, unfeeling products. He wanted ARMY to know the real, raw Jungkook, the one who gets overwhelmingly lonely in the middle of the night despite having the world at his feet, the one who cries openly while watching romantic anime or listening to fan-made songs, the one who completely forgets his superstar status and just wants to get drunk and sing his heart out without a frantic manager banging on his door telling him to stop. This wasn't just a wealthy boy acting out for attention. This was a seasoned, weary artist powerfully reclaiming his humanity, his voice, and his agency in an industry that constantly, relentlessly tries to strip it all away. His actions were undoubtedly naughty, utterly rule-breaking, and a massive migraine-inducing headache for his multi-billion-dollar agency, but for ARMY, it was the most beautiful, endearing, and revolutionary thing he could have ever done. It shattered the thick glass wall of parasocial relationships and replaced it with a genuine, deeply flawed, and profoundly beautiful human connection. Jungkook's legendary Midnight Weverse escapades proved once and for all that no matter how astronomically big BTS gets, no matter how many Billboard records they shatter, how many stadiums they sell out in minutes, or how many Grammy stages they conquer, at the end of the day, they are still those same rebellious, passionate, and fiercely independent boys from South Korea who just want to make music and connect with their fans on their absolute own terms. Number 6. V. The Phantom Masterpieces, deleting unreleased songs and driving HYBE crazy. If you thought the youngest member of BTS was the only one giving the pristine, hyper-controlled executives at HYBE massive headaches and sleepless nights, then you are completely hilariously mistaken, because our next entry features a man who essentially operates as his very own independent agency, writing his own rules, laughing in the face of corporate rollout schedules, and playing with the delicate hearts of millions of fans worldwide with the effortless charm of a seasoned villain. Enter Kim Tae-young, universally known as V, the man with the face of an ethereal Greek god, the deep, soulful baritone voice of a vintage jazz legend, and the wildly unpredictable, delightfully mischievous spirit of a true artistic rebel. In the highly calculated and intensely monitored ecosystem of K-pop, where every single audio teaser, concept photo, and song release is meticulously planned months, sometimes even years in advance by a massive team of marketing strategists, PR experts, and copyright lawyers, Tae-young decided that he simply did not have the patience or the desire to play by those suffocating corporate rules. ARMY, brace yourselves as we dive deep into the legendary, heart-wrenching, and undeniably naughty saga of V's phantom masterpieces, the breathtaking, unreleased songs he casually dangled in front of our tear-filled eyes, only to mercilessly delete them into oblivion just because he felt like it. Picture the scene vividly. It is a quiet, seemingly ordinary evening. The world is winding down, and out of absolutely nowhere, without a single warning ping from the official agency accounts, Tae-young logs onto Instagram, Twitter, or Weverse. He is sitting in a dimly lit, atmospheric recording studio, or perhaps he is cruising alone in his car, the neon city lights reflecting off his flawless features, looking exactly like a cinematic protagonist brooding in a moody indie film. Without any official announcement, without a single PR team greenlighting the broadcast or checking the lyrics for brand safety, he confidently hits play on a track no one has ever heard before. The melody instantly fills the speakers. It's a gorgeous, soulful R&B tune laced with heavy emotional undertones, or perhaps a sweeping, romantic, jazz-infused ballad that perfectly, flawlessly highlights his intoxicating, honey-like lower register. Millions of fans who miraculously managed to tune in are instantly mesmerized, their jaws literally dropping to the floor as they listen to this hidden treasure, immediately dreaming of the glorious day this track will officially drop on Spotify, inevitably shattering international charting records and sweeping awards. The lyrics are deeply poetic, painting vivid pictures of winter nights and fleeting romances. The production sounds incredibly expensive, complex, and polished, and the overall vibe is quintessentially, unapologetically Tae-young. But just as ARMY starts to collectively lose their absolute minds, furiously typing out translated lyrics and desperately recording their screens in a state of pure musical euphoria, Tae-young pulls off the ultimate, soul-crushing heist. With a cheeky, knowing smirk that practically screams utter defiance of industry norms, he looks directly into the camera lens and casually drops the devastating bombshell. "Ah, this song? I just wanted you guys to hear it once. I'm not going to release it." And before the global fandom can even begin to process the sheer, unadulterated devastation of that statement, he takes his rebellion a step further into absolute, irreversible madness. He doesn't just quietly shelve the songs in a dusty corporate vault. He actively, unapologetically throws them into the digital incinerator. He has brazenly confessed on multiple occasions, completely unbothered by the collective wails and dramatic protests of millions of desperate fans, that he has permanently deleted dozens of fully completed tracks from his personal hard drive simply because his mood changed, or because he felt they weren't 100% perfect, or, most hilariously and painfully, just because he wanted to start completely fresh. Do you remember the absolute agony of the infamous Travel With Me snippet? Or the heartbreaking loss of the upbeat, incredibly groovy, funky track he teased while driving around Hawaii in a convertible, his patterned shirt unbuttoned, the wind in his hair, looking like a carefree billionaire playboy on a lavish summer vacation? He posted it, watched the entire internet absolutely explode into a frantic frenzy of anticipation and desperate pleading, and then, with the casual, ruthless flick of his long fingers, he deleted the post forever and later confirmed on a live broadcast that the song was gone. Erased, tossed into the invisible trash bin of history like a crumpled-up grocery receipt. The sheer audacity of this man. You can practically hear the collective, synchronized gasps of the HYBE production team, the in-house producers who probably spent countless grueling hours mixing and mastering those beats, and the top-tier executives who saw millions of dollars in potential streaming revenue literally evaporating into thin air, all because Kim Tae-young firmly decided that his art was completely his to create and his to destroy. This wasn't just a one-time accidental slip of the finger. It became a thrilling, terrifying game of musical Russian roulette for ARMY. Every single time V posted an audio clip, fans instantly knew they had exactly 30 seconds to screen record it, download it, and back it up on multiple servers before it was scrubbed from the internet forever. But the glorious naughtiness of Kim Tae-young doesn't just stop at giving his billion-dollar agency massive heart palpitations over deleted masterpieces. It wildly extends to his entire unabashedly rebellious attitude towards the restrictive platform rules that are strictly meant to govern and sanitize idol behavior. Tae-young is infamously, affectionately known among the fandom as the unofficial CEO and supreme overlord of weavers, constantly challenging the app's developers, bending the rules, and demanding massive UI changes as if he personally owned the entire tech company, which, let's be honest, considering his impact, he basically does in spirit. Remember when he spontaneously decided to host completely unsanctioned, unofficial giveaway contests for ARMY, loudly promising them signed CDs, exclusive merchandise, and even offering to invite them to play video games with him, effectively forcing the frantic company staff to actually scramble and fulfill his wild, off-the-cuff generosity? Or when he loudly demanded the app add new features like custom profile pictures, read receipts, and voice notes, and when the corporate tech team didn't comply fast enough for his liking, he playfully but firmly threatened to pack his bags and move to a completely different social media platform, causing an immediate, hilarious panic behind the scenes to grant his every single wish. He actively treats the rigid, highly structured, and heavily monitored world of idol fan interactions as his own personal, unfiltered playground, completely dismantling the artificial professional boundaries and brilliantly turning the entire global platform into a chaotic, cozy group chat with his absolute best friends. He has openly and constantly rebelled against the suffocating concept of the perfect, untouchable, emotionless idol, choosing instead to be fiercely, sometimes brutally authentic and raw. If a fan posts something he disagrees with, or if someone crosses a line, he will not give a heavily filtered, PR-approved polite response. He will directly, wittily, and sometimes savagely call them out, showcasing a razor-sharp sass and a no-nonsense attitude that leaves fans both slightly terrified and deeply, hopelessly hopelessly in love. Number 5. Jin, the scissors of defiance, chopping his own hair and spoiling corporate secrets. When you think of the oldest member of a globally dominating, record-breaking K-pop group, you usually imagine a strict, authoritative figure who meticulously keeps the younger members in line, flawlessly follows every single corporate directive, and serves as the ultimate responsible bridge between the strict management and the chaotic artists. But if you think Kim Suk-jin, the undeniably gorgeous man universally known as worldwide handsome, fits perfectly into that predictable, boring, corporate-approved box, then you are in for a massive, hilarious awakening. Behind those impossibly broad shoulders, that angelic singing voice, and that devastatingly symmetrical face lies a brilliant, calculating mastermind of absolute chaos, a man who has made an entire career out of playfully terrorizing his own multi-billion-dollar agency and proving that absolutely no one, not even the most intimidating CEO in the industry, can tell him what to do. Army, we are about to unpack the sheer, unadulterated audacity of BTS's eldest brother, a man who routinely looks at the rigid, suffocating rulebook of the Korean entertainment industry, laughs his iconic windshield wiper laugh, and casually tosses it into the shredder. Let us take a deeply nostalgic trip back to one of the most legendary, jaw-dropping moments of unfiltered defiance in K-pop history, the infamous DIY hotel room haircut. In the highly manufactured world of idols, an artist's physical appearance is fiercely guarded property. Hair colors, cuts, and styles are heavily debated in long, serious boardroom meetings with teams of professional stylists, visual directors, and PR experts for upcoming album concepts. An idol is strictly forbidden from altering their hair without explicit written permission. But our Kim Suk-jin? He was simply sitting in his hotel room, looking in the mirror, and suddenly decided that his bangs were getting a little too long and bothersome. Did he call his professional glam team? Did he politely request a quick trim from the heavily paid staff waiting just down the hall? Absolutely not. Instead, he casually fired up a live broadcast for millions of watching fans, reached for a pair of incredibly dull, standard-issue hotel craft scissors or kitchen shears, and brutally, unapologetically started chopping off his own hair right on camera. You could practically hear the collective, agonizing shrieks of the big hit styling department echoing all the way from Seoul. He hacked away at his luxurious locks with zero professional technique, smiling brightly and chatting with the wildly panicking fans as chunks of his beautiful hair fell onto the carpet. And when the staff frantically tried to stop him from outside the frame, he simply looked at the camera with a triumphant, mischievous gleam in his eye, proudly declaring that he was the master of his own destiny and his own visuals. It was a hilarious, naughty act of pure rebellion that sent shockwaves through the fandom and left the agency absolutely powerless, scrambling to fix his choppy, uneven bangs the very next morning. But Jin's legendary naughty streak does not just magically stop at giving his stylists massive migraine-inducing heart attacks. He is also the absolute worst nightmare for the HYBE marketing and public relations departments. In an industry where comeback dates, track lists, and choreography are treated like highly classified top-secret government intel protected by ironclad non-disclosure agreements, Jin operates as a one-man leaking machine. He takes immense sadistic pleasure in casually dropping massive spoilers during casual fan interactions, completely ignoring the frantic, desperate waving of the managers standing just out of the camera's view. Do you remember the countless times he took to Weverse or a live broadcast and randomly started humming an unreleased title track or spontaneously performed a key point dance move months before the official music video was supposed to drop? Or the time he he boldly and loudly complained on the internet about the company's strict photo uploading guidelines, playfully threatening to post bizarre, unapproved selfies just to spite the social media managers. He actively treats the heavily fortified, deeply serious corporate structure of his agency like a massive, absurd joke that he is deeply delighted to punch holes into. However, beneath this incredibly chaotic, rule-breaking, and naughty exterior lies a profoundly beautiful, deeply reflective, and emotional truth that makes ARMY love him even more. You see, Jin's rebellion is not just mindless misbehavior, it's a highly calculated, deeply loving shield designed to protect his younger members and humanize the overwhelming, often terrifying experience of global superstardom. By being the one who openly argues with the staff, the one who brazenly demands more prize money during episodes of Run BTS, and the one who constantly shatters the pristine, untouchable idol illusion with his dad jokes and unfiltered complaints, he intentionally takes the heavy, suffocating pressure off the rest of the group. He shows the younger members who were thrust into the harsh, unforgiving spotlight at such a tender, vulnerable age that it's perfectly okay to say no, that they don't have to be terrified of the suits in the corporate office, and that they are, first and foremost, human beings with their own agency and autonomy. Jin uses his immense confidence and his naturally playful defiance to aggressively tear down the artificial, isolating walls of fame. He wants to ensure that BTS never loses their authentic, grounded essence, heavily reminding the world that despite the billions of dollars, the sold-out stadiums, and the Grammy nominations, they are still just 7 ordinary guys from South Korea. His naughty, boundary-pushing antics are a brilliant, necessary survival mechanism in a notoriously brutal industry that loves to grind artists into robotic submission. So every single time Jin boldly ignores a staff member's direct order, every time he uploads a blurry, chaotic photo that ruins the pristine aesthetic of the group's official feed, and every time he threatens to spontaneously cut his own hair again just to cause a little bit of trouble, ARMY doesn't just laugh, we deeply, profoundly celebrate it. We celebrate the man who refuses to be controlled, the eldest brother who wields humor and rebellion like a protective sword, proving time and time again that true star power isn't about perfectly following the script, but about having the spectacular, unmatched courage to completely rewrite it in your own glorious, unapologetic, and worldwide handsome way. Number 4. Suga, the silent mic drop, exposing lip-sync haters on live TV, and August D's unapologetic savagery. When you observe the intricate, carefully balanced dynamic of BTS, you might initially perceive Min Yoongi, globally beloved as Suga, or the fiercely independent August D, as the quiet, introverted, and deeply observant producer who prefers the comforting solitude of his dimly lit genius lab over the chaotic spotlight of center stage. But make no mistake, ARMY, because beneath that calm, feline exterior, those deceptively soft, gummy smiles, and that famously sleepy demeanor lies a dangerously sharp, brilliantly calculating mind and an unapologetic, fiercely rebellious spirit that has consistently delivered some of the most savage, industry-shaking, and gloriously naughty moments in the entire history of South Korean entertainment. If Jungkook and V rebel by breaking digital broadcasting rules, and Jin uses pure chaos as a brilliant protective shield, then Yoongi's unique brand of naughtiness is a cold, highly calculated, and absolutely lethal strike directed straight at the very jugular of his haters, the vicious media, and the hypocritical, deeply toxic standards of the K-pop idol industry. To truly understand the sheer jaw-dropping magnitude of his defiance, we must travel back in time to the incredibly tense, high-stakes atmosphere of the 2017 SBS Gayo de Jeon, a night that will forever be burned into the collective memory of the fandom as the ultimate display of savage supremacy. At that specific time, BTS was experiencing an astronomical, unprecedented rise to global fame, and with that immense success came a massive, suffocating wave of intense jealousy and baseless accusations from bitter anti-fans and rival fandoms. The most vicious rumor circulating wildly across the internet was that BTS's intense, physically demanding choreography was simply too difficult for them to sing live, and therefore they must be heavily relying on lip-syncing during their massive television performances. In the fiercely competitive and deeply proud Korean music industry, accusing a hip-hop-rooted group of lip-syncing is the ultimate, unforgivable insult to their artistry and integrity. Now, a normal, corporate-trained idol would have just put out a polite, PR-approved statement through their agency denying the rumors, or perhaps simply tried to sing a little louder during the next broadcast. But Min Yoongi, he decided to take matters into his own hands and humiliate the doubters on live national television in front of millions of viewers. Picture the electrifying scene. BTS is performing their aggressively powerful anthem, Mic Drop. The stage is bathed in intense, flashing red lights, the energy in the massive arena is absolutely explosive, and Yoongi, dressed in his iconic, edgy hip-hop gear, is completely owning the center stage. As the heavy, thumping bass line kicks in for his highly anticipated solo rap verse, he delivers the first few lines with venomous precision and flawless breath control. And then, right in the middle of a complex bar, he does the absolute unthinkable. He completely stops rapping. He doesn't just miss a beat, he deliberately, slowly pulls the microphone away from his face, aggressively drops his hands to his sides, and stares directly, piercingly into the main camera lens with a bone-chilling, arrogant, and utterly triumphant smirk on his face. For several excruciatingly long, incredibly tense seconds, the instrumental backing track continued to blast through the stadium speakers in absolute deafening silence. There were no hidden backing vocals, no safety net, no pre-recorded trickery. He essentially hijacked a major television network's live broadcast, completely breaking the strict, sacred rules of performance protocol just to boldly and brazenly tell the entire world, yes, we are singing completely live, and yes, you are all entirely wrong. The sheer, unadulterated naughtiness of that silent, mocking stare was a cultural reset. You can only imagine the absolute panic in the broadcasting control room as directors scrambled, wondering if there was a technical glitch, while the HYBE management team probably collectively gasped at his impromptu, unapproved deviation from the script. But Yoongi did not care. He had just successfully orchestrated the most savage mic drop moment in history without even saying a single word. But his rebellious, naughty streak goes so much deeper and gets so much darker when he fully embraces his alter ego, August D. In a heavily sanitized industry where idols are strictly required to be polite, family-friendly role models who bow 90 degrees and smile constantly, Yoongi aggressively obliterated that pristine illusion. He dropped incredibly raw, heavily uncensored mixtapes full of biting profanity, aggressively calling out corrupt societal systems, mocking lazy peers, and openly bragging about his massive hard-earned wealth. He brazenly smoked cigarettes in his music videos, wielded weapons, showcased gritty, violent cinematic universes, and unapologetically flipped the middle finger right at the camera, leaving conservative broadcasting standards committees clutching their pearls in absolute horror. And this glorious, rule-breaking savagery reached its absolute peak during his monumental D-Day solo world tour. This was not a shiny, manufactured pop concert. This was a gritty, rebellious rock show. Imagine the unbelievable scene. Tens of thousands of fans are packed into a sold-out arena, screaming at the top of their lungs. Yoongi casually strolls across the stage, completely ignoring the traditional boundaries of idol behavior, walks right up to a grand piano, pulls out a literal bottle of fine whiskey, pours himself a generous glass, and takes a smooth, lingering shot of hard liquor right in front of the roaring crowd. Drinking alcohol on stage, actively encouraging the audience to scream intense curse words back at him, and exuding an overwhelming aura of absolute fearlessness is the exact antithesis of everything a traditional Korean idol is supposed to be. He shattered the suffocating artificial mold and replaced it with a deeply scarred, intensely human, and wonderfully flawed artist who refuses to hide his scars behind a corporate filter. This extreme level of naughtiness is not just for cheap shock value, it is profoundly emotional, deeply reflective, and incredibly healing for ARMY. Yoongi's fierce rebellion stems from a very real, incredibly dark struggle with his own mental health, his intense battle with depression, and the sheer crushing weight of public expectations. By being unapologetically savage, by refusing to force a fake smile when he doesn't want to, by swearing when he is genuinely angry, and by blatantly destroying the toxic expectations of the K-pop idol industry, he gives millions of fans around the world the ultimate, beautiful permission to be imperfect. He is actively, boldly telling ARMY that it is completely okay to set firm boundaries, to aggressively protect your own peace, and to loudly defend your own truth, even if it means being unfairly labeled as the bad guy or the rebel. Min Yoongi's legendary naughty moments are celebrated not just because they are shockingly bold and hilariously disruptive to his billion-dollar agency, but because they are powerful acts of profound liberation, proving once and for all that true, world-changing artistry requires a ferocious, unyielding dedication to absolute honesty, no matter who gets offended along the glorious way. Number 3. RM, the accidental whistleblower, spoiling top-secret comebacks and English cursing sprees. Have you ever stopped to deeply analyze the unimaginable, bone-crushing pressure of being the sole leader, the primary lyricist, and the designated international spokesperson for the absolute biggest, most influential musical phenomenon on the entire planet? When you think of Kim Namjoon, universally known and immensely respected as RM, you immediately picture a towering intellectual giant with a genius-level IQ of a 148, a man who eloquently delivers moving, historic, and deeply philosophical speeches at the United Nations in flawlessly self-taught English, and a fiercely responsible captain who meticulously guides his 6 famously chaotic younger brothers through the treacherous, shark-infested waters of the ruthless global music industry. He is widely perceived by the general public as the ultimate, unbreakable anchor of BTS, the absolute epitome of corporate professionalism, who flawlessly executes the agency's strict public relations strategies with grace and unmatched diplomacy. But what if I told you that beneath this heavily polished, profoundly diplomatic exterior lies a brilliantly chaotic, unapologetically rebellious mastermind who has single-handedly caused more massive multi-million-dollar heart attacks within the HYBE executive boardrooms than almost any other member in the group's long history? Welcome, ARMY, to the incredibly hilarious, intensely stressful, and gloriously naughty world of RM's notorious, completely unfiltered information leaks, his accidental corporate sabotage, and his absolute unyielding refusal to play the role of the quiet, obedient, and submissive idol when dealing with ignorant or disrespectful Western media. In the highly secretive, intensely guarded world of South Korean entertainment, where the tiniest detail of an upcoming album concept, a world tour location, or a massive musical collaboration is treated exactly like highly classified government intelligence protected by ironclad, deeply intimidating non-disclosure agreements and massive legal teams, Namjoon essentially operates as a walking, talking, and completely unstoppable security breach. Picture this incredibly tense, hilariously disastrous scenario vividly in your mind. Millions of passionate fans are tuned in to a casual, seemingly innocent live broadcast late at night. The high-ranking agency executives are finally resting easy, foolishly believing that their brilliant, highly reliable leader will stick perfectly to the carefully vetted conversational script. But then, with an incredibly endearing, deep-dimpled smile and an absolute, terrifying lack of self-awareness, Namjoon casually opens his mouth and starts talking. In a matter of mere seconds, he has completely, utterly ruined months of meticulous corporate planning and multi-million-dollar marketing rollouts. Do you remember the absolute, unadulterated chaos within the fandom when he casually dropped the exact dates, cities, and massive stadium locations for highly anticipated concert tours before the official ticketing platforms had even finished building the web pages? Or the countless, agonizingly hilarious times he went onto a live stream, completely forgot that he was essentially broadcasting to the entire global population, and started openly discussing, deeply analyzing, and even playing high-quality audio snippets of top-secret, unreleased collaborations with major Western artists. The sheer, unmasked terror that flashes across his handsome face when he suddenly realizes he has just massively violated strict corporate embargoes is pure, unfiltered comedy gold. But it heavily begs a very intriguing, challenging, and borderline conspiratorial question. Is the man who possesses one of the brightest minds in the entire industry truly just making innocent, clumsy mistakes as the legendary god of destruction, or is this his brilliantly calculated, intensely passive-aggressive way of aggressively wresting power back from the strict, heavily monetized corporate machine to secretly give his beloved fans the absolute inside scoop? But his legendary naughtiness wildly transcends beyond just leaking highly classified company secrets. It beautifully morphs into a spectacular, awe-inspiring display of savage defiance when he steps onto the international stage, fully utilizing his absolute fluency in the English language as a lethal, completely uncensorable weapon of mass destruction. In the rigid, heavily monitored K-pop industry, idols are strictly taught and contractually bound to be incredibly humble, polite, and submissive, especially during high-profile international interviews. But when BTS aggressively broke into the fiercely competitive Western market and were consistently faced with incredibly condescending, arrogant, and profoundly disrespectful interviewers who asked them heavily xenophobic questions, were shamelessly treated them like a temporary, manufactured, and talentless boy band fad, Namjoon completely, ruthlessly threw the polite idol rulebook right out of the nearest window. He realized very quickly and brilliantly that the Korean management staff and PR handlers standing right behind the cameras couldn't perfectly monitor, translate, or censor his rapid-fire English responses in real time, essentially granting him the ultimate glorious freedom to unleash absolute razor-sharp savagery with zero immediate consequences. Instead of offering polite PR-approved smiles and bowing respectfully when faced with ignorant questions about their dating lives, petty Western pop star drama, or shallow observations about their massive success, Namjoon would heavily lace his profound responses with brilliant, biting sarcasm, throwing incredibly sophisticated, highly intellectual shade that completely flew right over the clueless interviewers' heads, while simultaneously making millions of ARMY absolutely scream at their screens in triumphant, deeply vindicated delight. He aggressively refused to let absolutely anyone disrespect his brothers or their immensely hard-earned blood, sweat, and tears artistry, effectively using his towering intellect and his incredibly sharp tongue to completely dominate the conversation and force the Western media to respect them as true artists. And let us not even begin to discuss the absolute earth-shattering madness of his live concert performances, where he violently breaks the pristine, conservative image of a heavily sanitized Korean idol by aggressively hyping up the massive stadium crowd with raw, completely unscripted, and heavily censored English profanities. Hearing the dignified, incredibly well-spoken UN ambassador aggressively yell, "Put your massive effing hands up," across a sold-out 80,000-seat international stadium is a gloriously naughty, deeply thrilling experience that violently shatters the artificial, squeaky-clean illusion heavily enforced by conservative Korean broadcasting standards. This unapologetic, fiercely rule-breaking attitude vividly and beautifully bleeds directly into his deeply personal, profoundly introspective solo musical work, most notably in his critically acclaimed heavy-hitting projects like Indigo and Right Place, Wrong Person, where he brazenly smokes cigarettes on camera, heavily curses in his deeply poetic lyrics, and openly, aggressively expresses his profound exhaustion, intense anger, and bone-deep dissatisfaction with the suffocating, artificial, and relentlessly plastic nature of the idol industry that constantly, tirelessly tries to forcefully mold him into a perfect, unfeeling, and completely flawless deity. Number 2. Jimin, the sensual saboteur, flirting with censorship and defying global gender norms. When you hear the name Park Jimin, the absolute main dancer and incredibly powerful lead vocalist of BTS, what is the very first image that immediately pops into your mind? Do you deeply envision the incredibly sweet, soft-spoken, and profoundly affectionate Mochi who constantly showers his members with warm hugs and acts as the designated, unbreakable emotional support pillar of the group? Or do you vividly picture the breathtakingly graceful contemporary dancer who effortlessly and beautifully floats across the massive stadium stage with the delicate, ethereal beauty of a magnificent swan? Well, Army, it is absolutely time to completely and violently shatter that heavily sanitized, pristine corporate illusion, because beneath that angelic high-pitched giggle and that flawlessly sculpted, devastatingly handsome face lies an intensely fierce, unapologetically seductive, and gloriously rebellious stage demon who has made an absolute breathtaking career out of constantly terrorizing conservative broadcasting committees, deliberately pushing the absolute terrifying limits of national censorship laws, and violently dismantling the incredibly toxic, hyper-masculine standards of the entire global K-pop industry. Are you truly emotionally prepared to confront the intoxicating, dangerously naughty side of Jimin that consistently leaves massive, highly paid corporate executives sweating profusely in their expensive suits and begging for mercy? In the deeply conservative, strictly monitored, and heavily regulated landscape of South Korean television, there are incredibly rigid, highly specific guidelines regarding exactly how much skin an idol is legally permitted to show, specifically dictating the exact measurements of performance clothing and intensely prohibiting overly suggestive, highly provocative choreography during national primetime broadcasts. But Jimin, he brazenly looked at those suffocating, intensely restrictive rulebooks, flashed a wickedly devastating, incredibly knowing smirk right at the camera, and violently decided to turn the entire rigid concept of national censorship into his own personal, highly provocative, and completely unfiltered playground. Let us take a deeply nostalgic and intensely thrilling journey all the way back to the legendary, culturally resetting, and visually spectacular era of blood, sweat, and tears, a monumental, groundbreaking time when Jimin single-handedly caused absolute, unadulterated chaos across every single major television network in the country. Do you explicitly remember the completely iconic, culturally defining, and heavily analyzed dance move where his intricately, heavily embellished, wildly expensive designer jacket would just so accidentally slip off his beautifully sculpted, perfectly toned shoulder right at the absolute, heart-stopping climax of the intense choreography? The frantic, highly stressed broadcasting directors would desperately try to aggressively change the live camera angles, rapidly cutting to wide shots or desperately zooming in on the other members in a state of absolute blind panic, completely terrified of violating strict national decency laws and facing heavy government fines. But Jimin, fully armed with an incredibly lethal, hypnotic, and fiercely intimidating gaze, would deliberately, slowly, and sensually let that luxurious jacket fall perfectly on cue every single time, brilliantly masquerading his intentional, intensely rebellious act of raw, unfiltered sex appeal as a mere innocent and unavoidable wardrobe malfunction. It was an absolute masterclass in deeply calculated naughtiness, a brilliant, subtle, yet aggressively loud middle finger to the heavily sanitized, artificial purity forcefully demanded by the rigid, highly controlling entertainment industry. But his absolute, undeniable defiance against the strict, suffocating corporate rules extends so much further beyond just accidental wardrobe slips. It violently and beautifully bleeds into his intensely passionate, deeply personal, and heavily stigmatized relationship with body art. In South Korea, tattoos are still widely considered highly taboo, deeply and unfairly associated with underground gang violence in the conservative older generation's minds, and are strictly required by ironclad national broadcasting laws to be heavily blurred out, completely covered up with thick skin-colored medical tape, or securely hidden beneath long, stifling sleeves during any major public television appearance. For decades, ambitious idols were absolutely terrified of getting permanently inked, fiercely fearing intense public backlash, vicious media scrutiny, and the devastating loss of massive multi-million-dollar brand endorsement deals. But Jimin absolutely refused to let an antiquated, heavily conservative, and deeply judgmental societal norm violently dictate what he could and could not do with his own physical body. It all started with the legendary, profoundly emotional "Nevermind" tattoo boldly and aggressively inked across his ribcage. For the longest, most agonizing time, the billion-dollar agency and the incredibly observant fans collectively believed it was just a temporary, highly detailed henna piece specifically designed for a single-stage performance. But as the years beautifully rolled on, the jaw-dropping truth dramatically unfolded. It was absolutely permanent, and he was completely, unapologetically, and fiercely proud of it. And he didn't just stop there. He aggressively expanded his beautiful, highly personal collection with the incredibly meaningful number 13 on his wrist, the deeply emotional "Young Forever" delicately placed directly above his elbows, and the stunning, intricate, and deeply symbolic moon phases beautifully running down his spine. But the true, absolute peak of his glorious, heart-stopping naughtiness was exactly how he deliberately, brazenly chose to showcase this highly stigmatized artwork to the entire watching world. Instead of politely, obediently, and quietly hiding his deeply personal tattoos to appease the conservative, easily offended broadcasting executives, Jimin actively, purposefully sought out incredibly sheer, transparent shirts, intricately woven, highly revealing lace tops, and dramatic short crop tops for his massive sold-out global stadium performances and high-stakes live television broadcasts. He would intentionally execute fiercely explosive, incredibly high-energy dance moves that would violently throw his shirts upward, proudly, aggressively flashing his strictly forbidden ink to millions of violently screaming fans and absolutely forcing the deeply flustered, highly stressed cameramen to helplessly broadcast his stunning, unapologetic rebellion to the entire globe. He was violently, beautifully tearing down the incredibly restrictive, intensely puritanical expectations heavily placed upon idols, fiercely proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that true, undeniable world-class artistry and a perfectly clean, totally untattooed image absolutely do not have to be mutually exclusive. And let us profoundly delve into his absolute world-shaking and fiercely brave refusal to conform to the incredibly toxic, deeply rigid gender norms that violently plague not just the South Korean entertainment industry, but the entire, heavily judgmental global music landscape. In a heavily manufactured, intensely commercialized world that constantly, aggressively demands male idols to perfectly project a very specific, heavily aggressive, and deeply superficial brand of traditional hyper-masculinity, Jimin brazenly, boldly, and beautifully embraced the absolute stunning opposite. He fiercely, violently shattered every single artificial boundary by actively, unapologetically choosing to wear tight, incredibly restrictive corsets, luxurious flowing skirts, delicate, traditionally feminine pearl necklaces, and intensely gorgeous lace garments, completely, beautifully blurring the heavily policed, aggressively guarded lines between traditional masculinity and stunning, ethereal femininity. Number 1. J-Hope, the smiling assassin, wrecking live stages with profanity, the dark rebellion of Jack in the Box. Have you ever stopped to deeply wonder what exactly happens when the literal human embodiment of sunshine, the incredibly bright, perpetually smiling, and endlessly energetic emotional anchor of the world's absolute biggest boy band, finally decides that he has absolutely definitively had enough of being everyone's perfect, flawless ray of light? When we passionately talk about Jungkook, universally adored by millions of devoted fans as J-Hope, the immediate, overwhelming image that violently floods our collective minds is one of pure, unadulterated joy, stunning, heart-shaped smiles, flawlessly executed, bone-breaking choreography, and an unwavering, almost terrifying level of strict corporate professionalism that flawlessly keeps the entire massive group perfectly synchronized. He is widely, infamously known among the members and the frantic agency staff as the fiercely demanding, incredibly intimidating dance leader behind strictly closed doors, but to the general, adoring public, he is the ultimate, pristine, untouchable idol, a man who has flawlessly and brilliantly maintained one of the most incredibly polished, tightly controlled, and impeccably positive public images in the entire ruthless, highly judgmental history of the South Korean entertainment industry for nearly a decade. But, Army, what if I told you that lingering silently beneath that incredibly bright, heavily manufactured, and deeply sanitized corporate sunshine lies a profoundly complex, intensely gritty, and fiercely rebellious underground hip-hop artist who was just patiently waiting for the absolute, perfect, world-stopping moment to completely, violently burn his entire pristine idol persona straight to the ground? Get ready to have your entire comfortable reality violently shattered. Grab your seats and hold your breath, because we have finally gloriously arrived at the absolute pinnacle of our incredibly intense countdown. We are about to profoundly dive deep into the legendary, heart-stopping, and gloriously naughty rebellion of a man who masterfully orchestrated the most brilliant, culturally shocking, and heavily censored solo debut the Korean entertainment world has ever witnessed. For years, the massive multi-billion-dollar agency heavily, relentlessly marketed him as the group's unfailing, unfaltering hope, strictly wrapping him in highly colorful, heavily saturated, highly profitable aesthetic concepts, forcefully boxing him into a neat, highly marketable, and deeply suffocating persona of endless, unbroken positivity. But as he organically matured into a fiercely independent, highly observant, and deeply introspective adult artist, the heavy, crushing weight of constantly, tirelessly projecting absolute, unfiltered happiness became a profoundly toxic, intensely isolating, and emotionally exhausting prison. And how exactly did this incredibly obedient, deeply professional, and heavily monitored idol finally decide to break free from these incredibly restrictive corporate chains? He didn't just quietly release a mildly edgy, slightly different pop song to gently test the waters. He violently, unapologetically kicked down the heavy, ironclad doors of the entire music industry with his monumental, critically acclaimed, and deeply unsettling solo album Jack in the Box, delivering a massive, shocking, and deeply satisfying slap in the face to every single conservative broadcasting committee that ever dared to try and police his raw, unfiltered, and deeply complex artistry. Picture the absolute, unadulterated chaos and sheer blind panic aggressively sweeping through the luxurious HYBE corporate offices when Hoseok explicitly, firmly told his highly paid management team that he absolutely, unconditionally refused to have a traditional, bright, highly commercialized K-pop comeback, heavily demanding instead to single-handedly create a dark, intensely gritty, deeply psychological old-school hip-hop record, completely devoid of the group's usual mainstream pop polish. He completely violently abandoned his signature bright hair colors, his colorful, highly accessible streetwear, and his infectious laughter, aggressively embracing a terrifying, intensely dark, and deeply sinister aesthetic, complete with heavily smeared, eerie, Joker-esque grins, and incredibly haunting, heavily symbolic music videos that looked much more like intense, deeply disturbing psychological horror films than traditional, heavily sanitized idol promotions. He literally set his past image on fire in the explosive, intensely raw music video for Arson, proudly walking through the blazing wreckage of his own manufactured identity, boldly declaring to the entire world that he was absolutely done being just a pretty, smiling face for corporate profit. But the absolute, undeniable peak of his legendary, world-shaking naughtiness, the exact jaw-dropping and culturally resetting moment that permanently and undeniably secured his spot at the absolute top of this list, occurred during his historic, unprecedented, and massive headline performance at the colossal Lollapalooza Music Festival in Chicago, a legendary night forever culturally immortalized in the history books as HYBE. In the deeply rigid, heavily monitored, and intensely conservative K-pop world, idols are strictly taught and heavily contractually bound to be incredibly polite, submissive, and deeply family-friendly on stage at all times, heavily avoiding any form of controversy, aggression, or profanity. But when J-Hope confidently stepped onto that colossal international stage as the very first South Korean artist to ever explicitly headline a major U.S. festival, he absolutely did not bring the polite, company-approved K-pop idol with him. He unleashed the raw, terrifyingly powerful, intensely rebellious, and incredibly dangerous underground rapper that had been violently suppressed for over 10 incredibly long years. Imagine the absolute breathless shock, the collective global gasp of millions of fans furiously tuning into the live stream broadcast, heavily expecting his usual bright, bubbly pop interactions and cute finger hearts, only to be violently, wonderfully greeted by Hoseok aggressively screaming intense, heavily censored English profanities at a completely sold-out, violently roaring crowd of over 100,000 people. Hearing the incredibly polite, supposedly innocent, and deeply respectful Sunshine of BTS aggressively yell, "Make some fucking noise," and heavily cursing throughout his fiercely intense, jaw-droppingly aggressive rock-infused performances was a deeply intoxicating, massively disruptive, and gloriously naughty experience that completely violently shattered the artificial, squeaky-clean illusion heavily enforced by conservative Korean broadcasting standards. He completely, ruthlessly threw the strict, polite idol rulebook into the raging fire, aggressively demanding the massive audience's absolute, undivided attention, not just as a heavily manufactured, easily digestible boy band member, but as a deeply respected, heavily formidable, and unapologetically fierce rock star who absolutely owned the stage. And let us not briefly forget the incredibly exclusive, highly secretive, and deeply chaotic listening party he masterfully threw right before the album's massive release, where he aggressively bypassed standard, heavily regulated agency PR protocols, personally and directly inviting the absolute elite of the Korean hip-hop and R&B scene, aggressively drinking heavy amounts of premium alcohol on camera, and completely disregarding the rigid, heavily policed hierarchy of the traditional idol industry, turning the heavily guarded corporate building into his own personal, highly exclusive underground club. He was actively, boldly, and loudly telling the entire world that he was completely done playing by the safe, heavily profitable corporate rules, fiercely reclaiming his own deep, raw, and wonderfully messy humanity.